Last night was the first presidential debate, and I said yesterday on the program that I didn't think either one of the candidates could win it, but one of them could certainly lose it. Well, I think Joe Biden lost it last night in more than one way. Please welcome to the program Fairmont State University political science professor Robert Bolton. Robert, good morning. What was your take on last night's presidential debate?
Well, Dave, keeping in line with the theme of your last guest, I knew we were more likely to see Bigfoot than we were to see a civil debate last night, but certainly temperatures got heated. Joe Biden, unfortunately, did pretty terrible in his performance, and I never thought I would see a presidential debate where the most divisive issue was who had the better golf game.
Yeah, that kind of, wow. We'll get to the golf in a moment. Let's start with President Biden. That's who everybody is talking about, or seems to be where the focus is this morning. Robert, my bar for President Biden was pretty low, and that was simply be coherent and dispel the narrative that he's too old. He did not clear that bar, and quite frankly, I think only reinforced the notion that he is he's too old for the job. Your thoughts?
Dave, I 100% agree. This was Joe Biden's debate to win or lose. With both candidates, neither of them are necessarily known as skilled debaters in the traditional format, but Joe Biden had some disadvantages going in to this debate. There's a perception, even though he and Donald Trump are only about 3 years apart in age, that he's much more geriatric, that he's much more elderly, maybe less coherent. Even though on many occasions in the past, such as his debate in 2012 against Paul Ryan when he was vice president, and even in 2020, he has occasionally been able to rise to the occasion. But last night he completely faltered. Very early on, I remarked to my family members I was watching the debate with that he was flailing. He did get a little better as he went along, but overall it was an extremely poor performance, and I think reinforced the perception among many voters that he is too old for the job.
What about Donald Trump and his performance? My bar for him was not act crazy. Again, not a high bar to try to get over, Robert, but he was fairly calm, subdued. Nothing like that first debate with Joe Biden last year that left such a bad taste in so many people's mouths.
Absolutely. This is the sixth debate performance I've seen with Donald Trump as a presidential candidate, excluding the primary races, which are a totally different bag. The three against Hillary Clinton, the two against Joe Biden, and the third in this one the first one for this election. This is definitely the best debate performance that I've seen him give. Not focusing so much on the actual veracity of his claims, but when you look at his ability to stay on point, his ability to appear passionate about the subject, and quite frankly, to look better than his opponent, Donald Trump did a much better job. If he was up against a younger candidate, Donald Trump maybe would have, or a better debater, Donald Trump may have had a poor time. When I was focusing on him, I did notice that he looked a little sweaty, he looked a little tired, he looked a little bloated. But when you compare that to Joe Biden, who, quite frankly, throughout the debate oftentimes was looking at him open-mouthed, I felt that Donald Trump did a much better debate performance than anyone expected.
We're talking to Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor. We're reacting to last night's presidential debate. As far as the substance of what either candidate said, Robert, I don't know if either one of them is actually ever telling the truth. They are so hard to fact check in real time, and they use such, and Donald Trump especially known for this, everything is always the best that ever was or the worst that's ever been, and you're trying to, in real time, go, wait a minute, what was going on in 2018? What was going on at the end of the president? What actually happened? Did he say that? Doing that in real time is so difficult. It's hard to judge. I thought it was hard to judge the quality of what was actually being said, and then for me, the focus just ended up on appearance and delivery.
I agree with you, Dave. One of the areas where that really came up for me is in regard to the topic of abortion. Now, as you know, I'm a lawyer by training, and I teach constitutional law at Fairmont State. And when both of them were describing the issues of Roe v. Wade, neither of them was 100% accurate. Roe v. Wade did summarize, as President Biden noted, that in the first trimester, abortion was basically left to the discretion of the physician and the woman. You could place some restrictions in the second trimester, and then in the third trimester, the states had a large amount of leeway in regard to how many restrictions they could place on it. And when they talked about, for example, Donald Trump said all legal scholars said that they were opposed to it, and Joe Biden said no, all legal scholars were in favor of it. Well, having been in the law school classroom, both as an instructor and as a student, I can tell you that there's a lot more nuance to it. Maybe some legal scholars, for example, would be critical of Roe v. Wade in regard to the results, while others are favoring it as a policy matter. But when you look at the actual substance, the logical reasoning, the writing style of the opinion, yes, many legal scholars were critical of it. But again, those types of nuances are very hard to provide in a 2-minute time frame. And likewise, when you're talking about issues such as the sanctions against Iran, the Ukraine war, there are a lot of complex considerations that come into play when you're the chief executive, that it is easy to paint with broad strokes and demonize the other side, but which when you look at the nuances, it's very likely that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump may come up with very similar policy results.
And the abortion question, I thought Donald Trump, aside from the rambling, playing loose and fast with the facts there, I thought he handled that question well. Maybe not to the liking of many on the the more right on the conservative side, but I thought he handled that question very well, because that is going to be a big point in the campaign for Democrats. I thought he handled that well by saying, from a strategy standpoint, Robert, of saying, hey, the Supreme Court ruled on the abortion bill, that's settled. I gave this back to the states. I'm not going to sign. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he did not seem in favor of a nationwide abortion ban. I thought he handled the question well, given that that is going to be a big issue on the Democrat side.
Well, Donald Trump is sometimes known, when he's speaking, for acting somewhat as an unfiltered stream of consciousness. And what did he say at one point? He said, you have to get elected. You have to take into consideration politics. And when you look at the poll numbers in some states, the American public is very vehemently opposed to abortion, or at least certain types of restrictions on abortion, while in other states such as California, New York, and some others, even moderate states like Ohio, you have seen them take a more moderate stance in regard to abortion. While the evangelical base is certainly among Donald Trump's strongest supporters, I think Donald Trump is smart enough to know that they're not going to vote for the alternative, even if his position on abortion is not completely in line with the one that they hold.
I thought his worst part of the night was the questions, and it was later on about January 6th. I thought he rambled and kind of dodged the question and went off in a couple of different directions.
Yeah, both candidates definitely rambled, but when Donald Trump was facing those questions that were inconvenient to him, abortion, January 6th, what I found is oftentimes he would hark back to the prior topic of conversation where he was able to effectively attack Biden and then bury that at the tail end. So instead of it providing a 2-minute explanation, it would maybe be only a 15, 20, or 30-second explanation. But yes, I agree with you. January 6th, considering some of the constitutional questions that it raised and the fact that it brought about an impeachment trial, it would have been nice to hear him discuss the issue more. And on a related topic, whether or not he's going to contest the results in November if he doesn't get the result that he wants.
Talking to Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor. So, Robert, this morning, again, watching the reactions, I've seen a handful of articles saying that President Biden needs to step aside. The Democrats need to find another candidate. Is that, I guess that's possible, but is that problematic? We're in here we are again, uncharted territory, but here we are. That's where we are.
You are more likely to see Bigfoot than you are to see Biden resign from the nomination. I can tell you that much right now. The Democratic National Convention is slightly looser with its rules than the Republican Party is. Technically, the Democratic delegates who will go to the National Convention in a few months are only bound to, technically they are allowed to vote their conscience. They're supposed to heavily consider and reflect upon the wishes of the voters that nominated them, but ultimately they are allowed some leeway in regard to how they can vote. You also have superdelegates, and these are party officials such as elected officers, longtime party delegate officials, etc. They have a lot more leeway in whether or not how they vote, but the superdelegates can only vote if there is a second ballot. If it's a first ballot, which is the way it's always been since the 1960s, late 1960s, they do not have any role in this. I do not see, even though Joe Biden had a pretty rough performance, even as MSNBC said, I do not see any realistic circumstance, absent a major health crisis or something in his personal life, that would cause Joe Biden to step aside. And also, quite frankly, even if Joe Biden did step aside, who are you going to pick as an alternative? Yes, maybe there are reservations about President Biden, but the poll numbers for some of the other contenders, such as Vice President Harris, are far worse than his numbers are.
Hey, maybe Joe Manchin's reconsidering that third-party run this morning.
Who knows? Maybe he's waking up and saying, geez, what if?
Fairmont State University political science professor, friend of the show, Robert Bolton. Robert, always appreciate your insights. Thank you, buddy.
Hey, always a pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
Absolutely. 9:47. We're back after this.